Hi, guys.
Hey, everybody. Heck yeah. Oh,
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So, that's as horrible as I thought it would be. Perfect. So this, starting off, is just an homage to the fact that if you have bad haptics, it's worse than no haptics. So that's kind of like my visual of that representation. Cool. So what are we here to talk about today? We're here to talk about explore different use cases in haptics, talk about the future of haptics, and just the landscape of the industry in its current state, including things like accessibility, where things are going in esports, all that kind of fun stuff. Wow, my face is huge. That's terrifying. I'm a haptics nerd. I was never a nerd growing up. It was only until recently I realized I'm a nerd. I was having a conversation with someone, and I said I'm in a haptics club, and they laughed at me, and I was like, oh my God, yes, that's not something normal people say. But I am in a haptics club. It's a podcast that we run every other week. We have guests like from D-Box, Immersion, Ultra Leap, and it's just a space where we explore different haptics technologies and talk about all the cool things happening. I also have a newsletter that just wrangles all the news about haptics, jobs, all that fun stuff, all the crazy things that are happening in the industry across automotive, consumer, academia. And I work at Titan Haptics, which is a haptic motor company. We have a component that works like a maglev train, so no springs, and it works like a maglev train. Let's introduce the rest of the panel here. Alex, want to kick it off? Give us a minute to tell us who you are, what you do.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Meland. I am the co-creator of the Between Realities podcast, a podcast on YouTube that happens every Friday. That's right. It's really good. Please go check it out. I am here at the event as a correspondent for Upload VR, the prominent news outlet. We're here gathering footage and doing interviews and stuff. And then a little bit more relevant to this talk, I am community manager for Haptics, which is the consumer haptic suit company. And they make wearable haptics peripherals that are modular and are used in consumer VR experiences like you can have on the Oculus Quest 2 or on Steam VR games. And it is awesome and a lot of fun and an absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Caleb.
All right, my name is Caleb Eubanks. I am currently a digital marketer, as what I kind of spend most of my time doing. I do a lot of social media syndication and brand management for a company called Board of Advisors right now. Before that, I worked 3 years for a company called Immersive Studios, and we did games like Pixelrip 1989, Pixelrip 1995, Yuki, and The Line, which was a very good experience for us. With each of these games, we have a little bit of haptics that we do involved with the controllers that we create, as well as previous to this, in 2016, I created my own haptics feedback chair. We called it the 4DFX transducer chair, and it was basically a big, it's basically a chair like this that we strapped a bunch of transducers and amplifiers to, just to increase that immersion in VR. So I'm somebody who loves to play VR, loves XR in general, and I like to get as immersed as I can. In 2019, I was America's #1 qualifier for virtual reality esports. And during that time, I got to go to China and compete in we call it the Virtual Reality Olympics, as you would. And so all those things require you to be your best in VR, and I think haptics is an important part of that. So I'm here to just give what information I can and help where I can. So thank you.
Perfect. Oh, wait, you missed one. Where'd it go?
Oh.
That's strange. Okay, well, Vaughn, you're here, obviously.
I'm here. Okay.
We had a slide, but please give us a
Hi, my name is Moreno. I'm a virtual reality developer. I remember the first time I got a controller vibrating in my hand was playing Wii Sports, and since then I decided I wanted to be part of this industry. For 2 years, I've been working at OWO as developer. OWO is a company that has developed a haptic system. Rather than vibration, OWO uses its own algorithm based on electric pulses, and it allows developers to create its different physical sensations. My work there is to create the necessary tools to make possible the integration of OWO haptic system into the virtual world. It includes video games, films, song. I'm so glad to be here, and I hope we can all have a very great session.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I promise we have a slide with your face on it that is offensively huge as well. But just so we're all on the same page with what is haptics, this is just a general, let's get on the same page. So haptics are in things like your mobile phone, your gaming controllers, your wearables. They're in 99% of mobile phones, so hugely peripheralated, can't see that word, headphones, cars. They're really in a lot of different technologies these days. The majority that you see in consumer tech are the spinning motors called ERMs. In your phone, it's called an LRA. Those are also in some gaming controllers. But of course, as per this panel, there are different types of haptics that are being implemented into the market, and it's a huge market. It's expected to be $28.1 billion in up to 2026. So there's a lot going on in the space, which is super exciting. And this is a cute image I found, which I thought was adorable because I had cats. The first question that I want to kick this off with is talking about favorite haptic experience. And I want to jump to Alex. What is your favorite haptic experience? What wowed you?
Well, I'll be honest. When I first had my first peripheral haptic experience with Haptics, the company that I work with, I didn't quite get it. Like it didn't land for me immediately. You know, I put it on. There was only 2 games that were compatible at the time, and I thought it was cool, but I was like, anyway, and I just kind of moved on with my day. And then there was a little VR game that came out called Half-Life Alyx. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of it, but that game was, of course, amazing and set a new standard for VR games. There's a very amazing, passionate person in the Haptics community that created a haptic integration for the Haptics tack suit that worked with Half-Life Alyx. And a lot of times when people, zip up a haptic vest, their brain automatically kind of goes to like the sensations of maybe a grenade blowing up at your feet or somebody firing bullets at you or something like that. And that's all cool, but there was a moment that sold me, and it was when I picked up a piece of resin in the game and dropped it over my shoulder, and the motors, which by the way, there's 20 on the front and 20 on the back, and they fire in a pattern, in sequence. So when I dropped this thing over my shoulder, the top motors fired first, and it went and landed at the bottom of the bag on my back. And it was like, it melted my brain. I realized that the immersion there isn't just for stuff like being attacked or attacking or being blown up or anything, but like little moments like that where I just felt something land into my backpack, and it completely melted my mind and totally changed the whole narrative for me when it comes to what haptics can do in immersive experiences.
That's awesome. Love Half-Life Alyx. It's so good. Yvonne, favorite haptic experience?
My favorite haptic experience was, well, the first time I tried Owo skin, I felt a dagger wound, and it was mind-blowing. I started running back because I couldn't believe it. I changed my mind. Later on, Owo developed a virtual reality cinema, in which you can see films and video gameplays, and you can feel what the player is feeling or what the character is feeling. And I remember seeing, for example, Titanic, which is a normal film, and the less expected sensation was when the character was falling in the boat. Mm-hmm. Sorry for the spoiler. I started feeling the heartbeat. The character was feeling obviously nervous, and I was feeling that sensation, which I could never felt with the eyes or the ears.
Very cool. That sounds awesome. Yeah, hopefully it's not a spoiler for anyone. For a 3-hour movie. Hopefully you got through it. Caleb.
Well, I would say my first amazing experience with haptic feedback would have to be the chair that I created, partly because I had a haptic vest at the time. It was called a Core FX vest, and it had 2 little transducers on the chest. Some of you might have heard of this. But it was basically a tease at what haptics could do for me. And I felt it, and I thought, man, this is great, but I want more. It was so weak and didn't do much for me. So by putting a couple really powerful transducers on my chair, I was able to actually feel what felt like a jet engine underneath my seat, basically. So when I was playing things like Elite Dangerous or War Thunder, when you're in an old World War II plane, and you can feel the rumble of the aircraft with you, that immersion right there with the headset on, looking out the window, feeling like I was in an aircraft. I've flown before many times. I've actually flown small aircraft, and having known the real life situation and then sitting in my room in a virtual environment, I can say it was one-to-one. I had the same feelings, the same visuals, and the same actual mindset that I would if I was in an actual plane. And that, for me, was a huge signifying factor, saying that not only can this actually help people in VR, it can really actually let you know when there's problems or when there's issues, if it's actually set up properly. I will say, though, to add on to a fun experience, my favorite haptic VR experience so far has been at the Void. Sometimes when you think about haptics, you've got things that you can touch or things that you can grasp or things that come at you. In the Void, you do everything. You are wearing a vest that's got haptics, you've got haptics around you, and you've got sight, smells, and things that are coming at you in the room, things that you can actually sense. So I was there during a Wreck-It Ralph experience at the Void, and having Wreck-It Ralph run by me and feeling the floor actually rumble as he went by me, I thought to myself, man, I know he's not here, but I'm pretty sure he might be. So having that ability to trick me and to make me feel like I'm in an environment with things that I know I cannot be in the environment with, to hang out with digital characters and to feel like they're there with me, that was the best so far.
That's awesome. Love that. Next one is why are haptics important? And to kind of put a little kind of caveat or background in that question, haptics are kind of like another element in even game development on top of all the other things that are being included. And sometimes it gets left behind because it's time and money spent that has to be spent somewhere else. So there's a lot of questions around why haptics are important. So I want to approach it in that kind of method. Alex, how about we kick it off?
So I'll be honest, I think the moment that sold me on immersive experiences as a whole was a haptic experience. And this is like a fun little thing too. My first purchase ever in my life was the N64 Rumble Pack. Like when Star Fox came out, I did chores for 2 weeks straight so I could purchase that. And I feel like it's hilarious. It's all kind of come full circle. Mm-hmm. But when I was first kind of dabbling into VR, I had done a couple experiences. I did a PSVR demo and I was kind of blown away by it. And I was like, I need to try this in multiplayer. I need to try some multiplayer. So I went to an arcade and I begged them to put me into a multiplayer experience and they tried to talk me out of it. And I still did it anyway. And because all they really had was Rec Room. So they threw me into Rec Room, and long story short, I high-fived a stranger. And when I high-fived them in VR, and I'm new to multiplayer VR, and I felt that haptic vibration in the controller, my mind was like, I just high-fived someone across space and time. And it blew me away. I couldn't believe it, how space and time doesn't care about my connection with this person anymore. And I think that haptics are our way of getting confirmation that something is happening in the virtual space. If there was no haptic sensation, my hand just would have passed through that one and I wouldn't have really had that magical moment. But without haptics, there's no real way to get that confirmation that you pushed that button. You high-fived that person, you shot that weapon and it recoiled in your hand. It's all about confirming our virtual experiences, in my opinion.
Very cool. Yvonne, I want to take this from a kind of different angle for you, because in many of my presentations, I ask the crowd, who's your favorite haptic developer, and no one ever puts up their hand. But you develop haptic effects. So what would you say to folks who maybe don't understand the value of haptic effects in the projects?
Well, I think when you are going to develop a haptic effect, you have to think about what you are developing is information that can be received from other sources. When we obtain information from several sources at the same time, the eyes, the hearing, and also the touch, the tact, we retain better the information. So if we know what we want to generate in the player, and we develop a haptic effect like Alex said, the high five, you can create like a sense of that you're there.
Mm-hmm. Sense of presence, that's really cool. Caleb?
Yeah, just to kind of back off that, this question instantly makes me think about what it was like developing for the studio, Arvery. We had several games that, as you said, when you grab an object, you have to make the controller vibrate. And when you're a developer, you can kind of choose how strong do I want this vibration to be and how long should it last. And generally, you want it to last for a short amount of time and be just enough to actually give enough tactile feedback to let you know what's happening. And as we said, if you don't do this, you start to feel like you're lost in the world. You start to feel like you're actually just going through objects and you don't feel like you're part of this virtual world. I think most of us right now are very much inundated with haptics already. If you have a cell phone, every time you hit your little text button or hit your buttons, you're going to feel that. And most of you are already very advanced with that, and you understand that very well. The same thing happens in VR anytime we click on anything, but even more so when it comes to sports or even other games such as like a bullet hell game like Yuki. When we played that game without haptics and you're trying to traverse this spacecraft through a bunch of bullets that are coming at you, it's not fun. It's actually boring and it feels in a way that makes you angry because it doesn't feel like you can actually understand it. It's too fast. The moment we added point clouds and density clouds of haptics in there, where you actually get close to objects and you can start to feel the controller rumble as you're getting close to it, you know, back off the controller a little bit. So not only am I visually now playing the game, I'm actually visually and I'm physically playing the game. And that's the big difference with the haptics, is they allow us to physically and visually play a game. And that, to me, is the big difference from real life and playing a video game. And what makes virtual reality, which makes haptics and XR so interesting, is the fact that I'm actually playing. When I'm doing sports, I'm learning multiple things about my body and the environment around me. So that's really the big thing. Is one thing I want to say about that is if that game didn't have haptics, nobody would play it. Adding haptics to that game makes it fun, enjoyable, and actually gives you a learning curve to allow you to get better. So there's a lot of things people don't really think about in development, but without haptics in VR or XR, you're not only missing it, you're completely creating something that people can't really use efficiently. So the question always becomes of how are you going to feel those haptics, and how are they going to be programmed in a way that makes people feel immersive feeling that's actually going to be unifying and actually make people want to enjoy it and get better at it. It's just something that I think that we're constantly trying to figure out. But when we feel it, when you get that aha moment, you go, oh, that felt good. That's when you know. And then this is where it's really fun for us to get to play with that and actually kind of discover it together.
Yeah, if I can piggyback a little bit, you know, it conveys information. Like that's really what's happening is information is being conveyed that you're not relying on your eyes and ears to gain. And competitive gaming is the easiest way to explain that, I think, because anybody who's played a first-person shooter, flat screen or VR, knows that when you take damage in one of these games, you kind of have to rely on either sound cues, like you hear where it's coming from, or an on-screen indicator of some kind, maybe like a red arrow that like points behind you, you know. But in the heat of battle, like I don't have time to pay attention to red indicators, and like I don't know exactly which direction these bullets are coming from because things are super crazy. But if I'm wearing a haptic suit that has the ability to convey accurate directional accuracy of the incoming fire, then when I feel something behind me, I no longer need to rely on on-screen indicators or audio cues. I felt it, and now I can react and actually gain a competitive edge in a lot of those experiences.
And what you're describing fits a lot of use cases in training, in like simulators, because it's the same effect that you need in order to understand what it's like to be in that situation. Yeah, very interesting. Let's jump to cool technologies that people can access today. A lot of my friends are always, they're paying me like, what can I play with, what's available? Not everyone really knows, it's kind of hard to find it all. So I want to just quickly go through what's accessible, and you guys have companies that sell cool tech, so let's start there. Yvonne, what are cool haptic technologies that everyone should know about?
Well, we know all about the PlayStation 5 controller, which includes the new vibration, HD vibration, they call it. And this is the same technology the Nintendo Switch controllers use, and it allows you to feel a very precise sensation when you are playing a game or you are playing with something inside your controller. It can simulate almost perfectly that you have inside an ice cube or balls or rocks. Yeah. I also more in the best part. There's the haptics. There's Oculus Quest with the controllers, HTC Vive.
All the fun toys. Alex, you're at GDC. What did we miss there? That's haptics.
There are a handful of companies that are taking a stab at making haptics accessible and putting them into the hands of regular people, because a lot of haptic technologies, there's some amazingly profound haptic technologies out there, but a lot of them are bound to the enterprise spaces, or huge companies have them, or they cost like tens of thousands of dollars. Haptics, the company that I work for, is, like I said earlier, definitely a consumer haptic suit company. And the X40, which is a vest that has 40 motors on it, like I said, 20 on the front, 20 on the back, sells for $499, retails for $499, which, for VR enthusiasts is within reach. And it's also modular, so you can start with the vest, and then once you realize, okay, this is awesome, it's hilarious because it's almost like this inevitable progression. You put the vest on and you've not been used to being able to feel embodied haptics before, And once you realize like, oh, I can feel incoming fire in my competitive shooters, you'll see where the haptics are missing on the rest of your body. You're like, oh, but I didn't feel that thing with my arm. Or, oh, when I got headshot, there was nothing there. So you slowly can find the reason why you would actually want to be fully kitted and be able to feel haptics all over your body in an immersive experience. But to answer the question, Haptics is doing a lot right now to make this accessible and to integrate with as many possible games. There are dozens of natively integrated games on the Quest 2, which of course we all know is the most popular headset out there right now. People with Quest 2s can pick up this modular Haptics kit and throw it on, fire up a game, and connect it via Bluetooth, and wirelessly they're in. And I find the experiences to be quite compelling. And I think most people who have a legitimate haptic experience also find it to be quite compelling. So I'm very excited for the future of consumer and accessible haptics.
Sweet. Yeah, in terms of like haptics that are more for industry, there's actually a few folks here that you can check out in the playground or in the other area tomorrow. One of them is Haptics. There's also Sense Glove. So there's an opportunity to actually check out some like the really cool tech that you may not have a chance to play with otherwise. So just a side note. In terms of latest trends, there's been a lot of interesting trending things happening. These are two. One of them is the mouth haptics, which is just not a great name. But I want to just talk quickly about what other types of trends that you've noticed, things that are kind of top of mind. Caleb, what have you seen?
Trends.
Yeah,
Oh
trends.
yeah. No, as you said, we're right now we're kind of stepping into the zone of what's possible, not really what's tangible and useful. I would say people are trying to figure out how can we simulate kisses, how can we simulate these different feelings, but really, what's the best use case for these things? I would say what I would like to see is trending. What I hear people talking about is, of course, relationship type apps where people want to be together. They want to hug, they want to touch, they want to feel each other. Not necessarily sexual, but just intimately. And virtual reality obviously gives us that ability to connect with people when they're far away, but we don't really have that ability to touch each other yet. So there's a lot of devices right now that are being figured out to do those kinds of things, whether or not they're transducer or sensory effects or whether they're electrical stimulations. I just see that trend of trying to connect people happening right now in the industry, but I don't really see tangible products as of yet. If you all saw Ready Player One, which everybody in this room, I'm sure we all did, right? So they had the classic gloves there. They had the vest that he was wearing, and of course the treadmill that he runs across. And all those things actually exist right now. And if you try them right now, you'll say, well, it doesn't quite put me in the world like it does in that movie. The truth is that's because those things won't do that. At some point we do have a limit to where these haptics can go. So it's like the question isn't how can we be completely immersed, it's how can we best immerse ourselves truly, and what are those best use cases. And what you said earlier, what I see actually happening right now is we have a medical industry which is currently using a lot of tactile feedback for doing whether it be surgeries or just trainings. Things like that I find to be very useful. And so you've got audio clues and just tactical vibrations, which are very, very important in almost every field right now. But when it comes to actual devices, I'm skeptical with any add-on or wearable that you have to have that's going to do everything. I don't quite see that happening yet, but I'm still paying attention. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Do you guys want to add any trends, things that you noticed?
What I've been seeing last years is the huge evolution of augmented reality. For example, with Niantic, the use of intelligence, artificial intelligence, to detect the environment and be able to put things in there that aren't in there. And I think that a mix of augmented reality and haptics can break the technological barrier and make you think, what's the difference? If I think my house, a virtual representation of something in there, and it's interacting with me, and it's making me feel something.
Mm-hmm. My mind immediately goes to gloves and hands. Hand tracking applications, in my opinion, the primary thing that holds hand tracking applications back is that lack of confirmation. Mm-hmm. Controllers have haptics built in them, your hands don't. So there's a lot of companies I think that are looking for that solution. The best way to find some kind of glove or something that allows for haptic sensations in hand tracking applications, or at least like more like real, like maybe they're other than haptics, just like vibration haptics. Mm-hmm. The other part of it is the force feedback part of it. You know, there's hand tracking applications that exist where maybe you want to reach out and grab a can, but you go squeeze the can and your hand just closes over top of it. A lot of people want to figure out, I think, how to stop your hand from closing when you reach out to grab that virtual object. And I think that that's going to be kind of like the next biggest focus, is finding out how do we make our hands get those haptics and get that confirmation to the virtual world that we need.
Awesome, I love that. We're going to jam on that further in a few slides. But let's jump into interesting video is missing. That's okay. Sarah from Haptics was posing a question. What are some key considerations in developing awesome haptic experiences? So from a company perspective, you're building something cool. What are the things you need to do in order to make sure that it comes across? Yvonne, how about you kick us off?
I have two advices. The first, I think, I advise do not saturate the user with a lot of haptic feedback, because maybe the message is diluted and the user don't understand what's going on if you start feeling a lot of things at the same time. But if you know, as I said before, what do you want to generate in the player? Scared, nervous? Do you want to enhance a situation? With haptics, we can replace also another sense. If you don't need to see a counter if you feel the sensation of the counter changing. So, for example, in an adventure fiction game, in which you are taking decisions and you are making a dialogue, maybe, if you want to make the player feel nervous about something, I will add the same as Titanic, the heart rate, when you choose an option, and that immediately will make the player feel alert. What's going on? Why I'm feeling this when I choose that option? And what happens if I choose that other option? It's another kind of interacting with the environment and receiving information, which is not physically realistic.
How do you balance that with too much haptics, like too much going on? Because it's like if you have too many layers of haptics, it becomes like overwhelming or distracting, or it can. How do you balance that?
I think it depends on the game and the goal of haptics in that game. If you are in a shooter, obviously you are going to feel the bullets and the impacts in a lot of different parts of the body. But in other kind of games, maybe the haptics goal is not to represent realistically the sensation of the touch, but to make the player understand the virtual world in a way it can't be possible with the other senses. Maybe feeling the illness of the main character, or feeling the emotions of other.
Love that, the conveying of emotion.
That really is a balancing act, you know, because there are, like, I'm trying not to get hit when I'm playing a game. You know what I mean? And a lot of times a haptic integration, like, you only feel the haptics when you get struck by something. And I'm not trying to be struck. So let's say I'm amazing at the game and I blast through it without taking any damage at all. Does that mean I don't get any haptic experience? You know what I mean? So from my perspective, like, I want there to be a value for that device. You know, like, I want the people who bought the vest to be like, yes, this was worth it. And if they play a whole game and only feel it when they get touched the two or three times, that obviously there's not a whole lot of value in that experience for that person. If you're getting lit up the whole time, that might be a different story. So for me, it's about finding opportunities to create that haptic immersion, almost like outside of the box a little bit. And for me, one of those that's like almost an easy one to go and grab for almost every experience is a heartbeat. Because Half-Life Alyx being the example here again, I forget when I'm low on health. Like, I'll get hit a few times and then boom, I'm off and I'm exploring, and I'll forget that I'm one hit away from getting killed. But with the mod, with the haptic integration, when you are under a certain threshold, and it doesn't go away until you get that heal. So it adds so much urgency to that moment for me, and immersion, of course, as a result. But again, it's something that's a little bit outside the box, and it's not just like me relying on being struck. But to your point, too much happening all at once completely drowns out the effects, basically nullifies the whole thing, and you're just like wearing this vibrating machine while you're playing the game. So it really is a balancing act. But it's important to make sure that regardless of your skill level or what you might experience as you're playing through, that there is enough there to make people think to themselves, wow, this is really cool.
Love that. We're gonna keep trucking. This is, I don't know if the video works, guys. Give it a sec. Legendary. Oh, I promise he's saying stuff. Just trolling you. So what he's saying is, he's asking about exactly what you were talking about, Alex. He's saying, I love the idea of having my hands free without controllers, but I'm missing haptics, and that's a big problem. And like you mentioned, that's a big solve that a lot of people are trying to figure out. What are some potential solutions that you guys can think of that maybe will spur ideas for other people? Like we've seen Meta has like these wristbands that have haptics in them that can be used. Like what are the ways? Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I'll talk right away. I recently saw there's actually some cool demos of sonar activity. It's basically using sound waves, very high frequencies, to pinpoint actual spots of haptic feedback. So for example, if I was using the leap motion to show my hand, I could put this array underneath me and I would be able to actually feel and see an imprint on my hand of actual focal points where I'm feeling haptic feedback without any controller, without any gloves. This is a cool technology, and I spoke with the people at this company. I said, well, what are we going to use this for? And they said it can be used for everything. If you're in production and you want to play with dials that aren't really there, you can feel them, you can actually use them, and there's all kinds of ways that this could be used. The problem is we don't have a way to scale this really in a safe way. So talking about these kinds of things, there's lots of different aspects of this world right now, and maybe this will be something in the future that we can have an entire room that we can sonar in and actually be able to put 3D physical spots of physicality without actually having anything there. Even so, that's quite dangerous, and we're far off from that moment at the moment, or at the time being. So what I see is just as far as things that don't need anything there. High frequency sound is where it's at the moment, and also high frequency electricity. Also, they can use that to move objects, which they've been doing now more in the future. So I see those as potential. What I do not see happening, which is a lot of videos on LinkedIn and Facebook of a bunch of little mini robots running around the room, building sets for you as you're in virtual reality walking around. That is something that, although people are working on it, I think there's a lot of issues with that. So I see us running away from that physical world and finding other solutions, maybe more Star Trek holodeck type solutions in the future. As silly and as crazy as that sounds, we've got a lot of people working on things like that. So.
I'm right there with you. Very easy for me to go to like Black Mirror technology here. It's like, oh, we're just going to manipulate the brainwaves.
Yeah.
Done. You don't need a glove when your brain is being told what to feel. So that's fringe and far off. But I did kind of talk about this a little bit earlier. My company, Haptics, does have a consumer glove coming out later this year, early next year, with actuators in the fingertips for vibration, one on each fingertip, and I think they're adding an extra one on each hand. And those I had the chance to try at CES, and they're pretty cool. There's also guys like Lucas out there in the VR community who has created force feedback haptic gloves that basically have like winches on each knuckle that can like pull and retract ropes that kind of provide some of that force feedback stuff that I was talking about. So people are absolutely taking stabs at it right now. Obviously, they're still a little clunky. We're very much in the like early ages of all of this, like Atari age of haptics, and we're on our way to like the PlayStation 5 one day. So I think we're kind of looking at like the clunky, borderline hilarious stuff. Yeah. Like the photos of us using all of this gear today will probably make our kids laugh one day. Guaranteed, oh my gosh, look at that, it's so huge, and so I'm of course very excited to see where it goes, and I think it's already pretty cool.
Yeah, I personally think that the future controllers, maybe not only the hands, but I think the hands tracking is evolving a lot nowadays, and it is the most intuitive controller we can have as humans, and it can make you understand the norms and the rules of the game or experience you're playing, because you use your hands every day, and when you don't have to remember a combination of buttons in a video game, but you can pick something, place here, or open a panel, I think it can be a great evolution in order to understand the game.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm thinking of when I was playing golf, VR golf earlier, and I was like, told someone, take a photo, press B, and they're like, what's B? And like, there's like a whole group discussion of like, oh, so it's one of those things that's not super intuitive, even though you play with it normally. Next topic is ethics. Ethics is an interesting one. There's kind of two sides of it I want to touch upon. The irony of that topic, or that is, there was a recent article about like a girl who felt violated in a VR space because someone, a stranger, poked her and was kind of violating her space. And every time she was poked, she felt haptics. Let's talk a little bit about that whole. It doesn't need to be that story in particular, but that idea that haptics can be used in a way that can make someone feel uncomfortable. Who wants to talk about that first?
I find it pretty fascinating. Like, I mean, obviously that's like that's terrible, like we don't want people to feel violated by any of these things, Of course, I very much subscribe to the idea of duality. I think that like some people believe we're marching into a utopia, some people believe we're marching into a dystopia, and we talked about this recently on our podcast. It's probably something like both, there'll probably be utopian aspects and dystopian aspects. So obviously things like that are terrible, but it's sometimes like a necessary part of what we're dealing with, and ultimately it's just going to be on the community and on everyone to hold people accountable, try to put situations or systems in place that can alleviate as much of this as possible, but at the end of the day, I think there will always be ethical issues when it comes to some of this kind of stuff, and it's up to us to choose which side we want to be on, It's like, be on the good side if you can help it.
I will say, just from a developer standpoint, obviously, I think everybody needs to just have a very simple understanding. When it comes to the future of XR and VR development, every developer needs to make sure that they put controls in there that allow people to tell when they want to be touched, by who, and when. We can't let that ever happen. Haptics is supposed to be a field where we immerse people as much as possible. It's our job, literally, to make people feel everything that they want to feel. It's up to the developers that are then putting these things in place to make sure that the people using them have their rights and have their privacy and their freedoms that they need. That's really that needs to be done for everything. This is kind of it doesn't really matter what you're working on, that just goes for everybody all the time. We talk about use case scenario. Really, when we're doing haptics, it always depends on what you're doing it for. And as you spoke about earlier, if I want to grab something and feel that object, well, I'm doing a game where I'm using my hands. Obviously, I don't hold a controller. If I'm using a game where I'm using a gun, I want a haptic controller. There's different use cases for different things, so we need to stop trying to broaden everything. But when it comes to ethics, I think it really is just a matter of we need to always have a fine line of, yes, the haptics are going to allow you to feel everything. That's not a problem. The problem is when people touch you when you don't want to be touched, and that's very simply a development issue right there. And it's something that Facebook also takes very, very seriously when they're creating their things, as they've talked about openly. I think that's really just, as you said, holding people accountable. That's something that's, it's going to be there. We're going to have court cases in the future where people are, doing things, and that's where we need to just start soon, is how do we prevent that, right? So let's not even get to that point right there, and let's work on that with our developers, and of course, stories like this, whether they're clickbait or not, we do need to pay attention to them, at least have that discussion too. But this is something that I see is fixable, and it's something that we all have control over. Awesome.
Let's go into like a super fun topic. I don't know if this video is going to work or you're going to hear Manu at all. So pretend I'm Manu. What does the future of haptics look like in the next...
Hi, AWE, this is Manuel Sensity.
Perfect.
I'm a manager in UX design for the Digital Twins department at Unity, and I'm also a co-host of the Haptics Club podcast. We talk about haptics and XR and all of the things that I love as a designer. And one of the questions that I have for you is, what do you think the haptics market will look like from an XR perspective in the next 5 to 10 years? Have a good one.
Yvonne, kick us off. What do you think it's going to be 5-10 years? What's haptics going to look like?
I think haptics will be in our everyday life, and I think in the future it will be more accessible, not only in terms of costs, but also in terms of complexity. I think it will be another way of communication, a way in which you can create a pattern or a sensation and send it in WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, share with your friends or with some kind of people in internet. I think it will be a lot of tools and ways of creating experiences. For example, a cinema application in which you can pick a fragment or a film or a video game in AR and add your custom track of sensations and upload it to internet and share your creation with everything.
Awesome, that sounds exciting.
I love that. That sounds awesome.
I would like that, thank you.
Yeah, to get a message without having to read anything, you just feel the message. You're like, got it, felt that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's from my mother. I felt the message. It's from my friend Pedro.
Yeah, that's the feeling of my mom. I guess it's kind of piggybacking on you a little bit, but I mentioned earlier that my very first purchase was the Rumble Pack. But that was a peripheral, right? And nowadays, controllers, you cannot play a game without having haptics, and it's just the way it is. It's kind of similar right now, where like Haptics or OO or anything like that are peripherals. They're just extras. If you want it, you can have it. I don't think that that's going to be the case in 5 to 10 years. I think 5 to 10 years it'll be standard. Everyone, if you're in an embodied experience, you will be expecting to have embodied haptics.
Awesome, Caleb.
Yeah, just to talk about that, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a boom in esports. It's kind of the world that I spend a lot of time in. I'm sure there's other places for it as well. But what I see is happening is basically the desire for future esports. You see games like football and basketball people watch, but in the future, we're going to have actual physical people in arenas doing virtual AR type activities. And in that case, they're going to need suits, gloves, shoes, fields that are actually created with haptics built into them. That way they can feel that digital environment. We're noticing this a lot right now. You see a lot of AR commercials, or while your sports are on, they have AR things happening on the field where you can't quite actually do those things that they're doing on the field, but it looks cool, and it obviously gets people very excited and sells a lot. So I see that sports world really jumping up. I see these haptic feedback vests and things becoming standardized, as you said. And people getting used to this stuff. So it's you go to the store right now and you buy shoulder pads for your football stuff. You're going to go to the store and you're going to have your haptic pads. In a sense, I do see that world really jumping up, as well as I spoke earlier when it comes to relationships. I feel like there's going to be devices to help couples, as we have already now. We spoke about bands, where you can touch and your partner can feel, oh, my partner's touching me on the band. Similar things like that, where you can just receive a hug from being 10,000 miles apart. Being able to actually communicate with your loved ones and feel them is going to be very important for the future.
I think that's huge. Yeah, and like you were saying earlier, like just intimate, not necessarily sexually.
Of course.
I don't think that that's always going to be the case.
That's the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
lots of money there.
It's going to be a big thing too.
We're avoiding the
Awesome, okay. I think that, last part is resources and tools. I think one of the annoying parts about haptics is if you want to learn something and you search it, you'll probably not find what you're looking for, and you're probably going to have to like white rabbit into like a whole bunch of different things. Some of the solutions are like Haptic Labs is a fellow Thomas Mueller. He's a haptic designer, industrial designer, and he created this tool base so that you can learn how to design haptics and learn about it without having to like him go to school and spend years trying to figure everything else out. Do you guys have any tools or suggestions of how people can approach haptics if they're just kind of learning about the subject, or they want to get into it or want to integrate it?
Actually, there are a lot of resources, like we are seeing in the screen. Haptics Industry Forum have lots of information. It has released a book, which is there, and it's so interesting. And in internet, we can see more and more people are starting to implement haptics technology in their games. The most are mods, not native support to video games, but I think it's something like controllers haptics will become a standard. But you can start seeing in more forums tips and tricks and suggestions about how to implement different haptics technologies in your projects.
Awesome.
Yeah, on the Haptics side of things, there are like web-based tools that can be used to just go crazy. I mean, anyone who owns a Haptics device can use the web-based Haptics haptic designer tool and draw all over the vest, highlight individual ones, like just have tons and tons of fun with it. And then you can even go as far as to do something like maybe design like a show or a movie that you really like. You know, you can just watch the whole thing and kind of design haptics for it as you go along, and then play it at the beginning of the movie and feel stuff as you go, you know. So it's kind of like a fun, almost like a little like haptic sandbox that like is the way that I have designed all of the haptics that I have helped integrate. You know, I just use the web-based tool, draw on it, be like, oh, that should be stronger. Oh, I should feel that on the back, and it's a lot of fun. So you know, if anybody out there has those devices, they have instant access to those tools and can just start playing around and have fun.
That's awesome. And I've also noted AWE here, because AWE has been awesome at integrating haptics technology into the chats, like welcoming us onto the stage. Joe from Haptics is also has a talk tomorrow, which is going to be awesome on the industry side, talking about the metaverse. And so I think it's been great. There's also people like, you know, who've got demos you can play with, Haptics. OWO is going to be there as well. And so Haptics is such a small space. A lot of the events are actually Haptics dedicated. It's one called Smart Haptics, where like other industries don't go to it because it's really just a bunch of haptic nerds that, you know, are academics, and trying to talk to an academic sometimes about integrating haptic tech gets deep real quick. So yeah, so I think we have the Q&A time in a minute. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you guys want to say before we head into the question and answer period?
There's lots of things. No. I do want to say this is a great place. I've actually been to many conferences with their XR focused, and this is one of the best ones when it comes to haptics. So if you're here and you're interested in this field, tomorrow in the next few days, there's going to be a lot of exhibitors, especially Haptics and OWO?
OWO.
I got to try the OWO vest today, and it is something definitely you're going to want to try. You're going to want to try it. It was awesome. So I will say, yeah, one of the first things that I ever did, just saying to get people into virtual reality, we had in Brazil, I worked at location-based entertainment called Voyager, and we had one experience that was called Belief, and I will say haptics is the best way to get people to understand what virtual reality is capable of. Because VR can do so many amazing things to us visually and transporting us, but to actually feel the presence of being in another place, to walk across, whether it be a plank board, to feel an air conditioner hit you, to have a torch in your hand that's, you know, just an object that feels the same as it is virtually. All those little things can add up to an experience that'll blow your mind, change your world, and actually give you a different perspective on life. So that's why I care about this stuff and actually enjoy it so much.
I just want to say less can be more. Yeah. A lot of times people just want to crank their stuff up to 1,000,000 and just like experience the most intense haptics that they can imagine, but I have found that for an experience to be immersive, less can be a lot more. Subtlety in haptics should not be overlooked, and it does not take much. A subtle little bump is all it takes to connect you to what is happening. Your phone is the perfect example. You touch your phone screen, little tiny bump lets you know you touched it, and I think that's important to remember.
Awesome.
Returning a little bit to the esports, I think in esports, the more information, the better. And if not only haptics is for feeling shots and damage and physical things, it can also be a notification, an alert, and even a secret message from your teammate in the middle of the game. So I think it's a lot of future there.
That's cool. All right, question and answer time. Who has a question? Otherwise, I will steal the time because I have more questions. Anyone? Come up to the mic, please. Join us. I don't know which one's loud. Okay, yep.
Can you hear me? Yes, thank you for a great topic, great discussion. I'm a surgeon, and I'm also a sort of a passionate entity on XR. And for healthcare and for education. And one of my frustrations have been that haptics, although we have made some very small progress, I guess, in the last few years, is always or tends to be more focused on sort of non-altruistic things like gaming or esports or commerce, or when I think that there's such an opportunity to bring haptics to break barriers of geography and imagination and space and equity, and imagine for example, Fundamental VR, a company that does surgical simulation in VR. But it could be VR, could be AR, But if you look at the haptics, which is what fundamental VR is trying to do, at the very microscopic, almost proprioceptive level, you can do an operation in VR and feel the operation almost as if you were going to do it in real life. And so for me, the power of that is unimaginable. And so I guess my question is, why do you think there's been, other than money, and maybe that's the answer, why has that been so slow to develop? Because when you can develop a vest or gloves or even the sonar technology we talked about, which is I think where we need to go, right? Undress ourselves of any hardware, just try to be as natural, as close to reality as possible, not just in the optics and what we see or what we hear, but also what we feel. And what do you think that has been, where not so much in education, not so much in healthcare?
May I mean, I don't work in healthcare, but I am that gamer, and I play those games. And haptics, in its current state, I think most of the time is used as like an implication. You know, it's implying that something is happening, and then your brain kind of meets you in the middle and allows you to like, okay, yep, no, that's me getting hit. Oh, nope, that's my weapon firing. And you know, stuff like surgery, that's real, you know, like that's intense, and those haptics need to be perfect if you want to deliver that one-to-one experience of like, no, this is what a surgery feels like. So, I mean, if I had to guess, which I'm guessing really, I would say that it is, that the tech isn't quite there to deliver that experience, and it is easier to imply that things are happening in some of these other use case scenarios.
I see.
Yeah, and just to bounce as well, I think that you're completely right. The biggest thing is, I mean, I'm really glad you actually brought this up because I love that field. I mean, games are great, but where we're really going with this is applications that are tangible and useful to help society and help humans actually evolve and move forward. And really being able to do things quicker, more efficiently, and safer is where we're at. And what you just talked about, I don't think it's a matter of if it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. We're right now about 3 to 4 years away from really good haptics in VR, even right now. I say that because the way the headsets and the chipset's going to be, as we've already kind of seen in the next 3 to 4 years, is where it's going to be at with the adoption rate of people. The big obvious reason is why hasn't it come sooner? It's people. We've got millions of people that want to play games. We've got dozens of people that want to use haptic feedback VR surgery. You know, so and that's going to change over time. We're going to have that number turn into the hundreds, especially as more and more surgeons see the potential for it. I really do see that that's kind of a 10-year game, though. From right now, where we are, 2022, I would say around 2030 is what I'm hearing for the medical industry to really be using this stuff like on a day-to-day. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, not only medical ways, but for example, laboral risks applications in VR that can help you to operate in an electrical panel or to climb to a mountain to change some sensors can help to do things with the safety of your safe environment.
Yeah, I would say in academia is where I see that the most, and it's because you can get grants that help you solve those problems, but in terms of like widespread use, it's very isolated. So things like, I think Stanford's Shape Lab, they are working on those types of problems. So it's, kind of like you'd have to hunt for it specifically, but it's not something that's easily searchable, unfortunately. But people are trying to solve those problems, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi. So I have a question about adoption of haptics today, and we kind of talked about how it's kind of an afterthought of developers putting it in the last moment. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that is? And should the burden be on the developers to do the haptics? Should it be on like the different platforms to create easy tools, or is there like a space for some middleware companies that kind of bridge the gap between these two parties?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. I think it comes down to what's the amount of people who have it. You know, they look at their community, and maybe a game developer looks at their community and they say, okay, we're going to have 20,000 people playing our game. What percentage of those people are going to be using peripheral haptics in their thing? You know, I mean, I think for the most part, a lot of developers will include like controller haptics as like a normal part of their experience, but I'm kind of thinking more of like the peripheral stuff, because that's absolutely the case. So often we're trying to get haptics into a game like as they're trying to release it, or maybe shortly after they release it, and they're not able to find the time, because at the end of the day, when they're weighing their resources and their manpower, they're like, okay, fixing these bugs or adding a new level benefits 95% of our community, versus if we dedicate the manpower and service and money to putting haptics, that might help only a smaller percentage of our community. So a lot of times it's just like that, what is it, like Slack or something, or it's that board that people vote on like the most important things. I forget what it's called. But anyway, it just gets shuffled down. You know, it's like, nope, we got to fix these bugs. Nope, we got to add this content. Nope, and it just ends up not being that top priority as a result of it just not affecting as many people in the community.
Yeah, that's also the reason, because the majority of the content is made with mods, because also developers don't know which haptic device or technology is I'm going to implement. There are several haptic technologies, and which one is the best for the game. So it's also difficult to make a standard of implementation, because for there to be a standard, there must be a norm. And in haptics, every haptic device has its own characteristics, and it's difficult. We could make a standard in a high level, but to create an immersive, good experience, it's necessary to make a specific implementation.
Yeah. And that has to be done by the developers. Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to open up their code to a haptic company and they're like, okay, cool, let me just dive in here and add whatever
Yeah.
I want, you know? Like, so it's like a big wall, and it's a difficult one to penetrate. And we've definitely offered, too. We've been like, hey, let us in there, let us add it. And they're like, no.
I was going to say, actually, from my experience when I worked with Haptics, they actually offered the studio to Arvery. They said, hey, give us some time, we'll do it for you. Unfortunately, as you said, there's a privacy issues at that point in time. And just to speak to you directly, it's really a matter of money. At the end of the day, a lot of these studios are running up against a wall. And then to add those haptics is just more expensive. And as Yvonne said, the largest problem right now with haptics is the standardization. There is not an easy way for me to implement haptics that's going to fit multiple devices in one game. So we're using the word haptics very broadly right now. We're talking about external devices. Of course, every virtual reality game usually has the controllers and the haptic feedback right there from the controllers is already going to be there, and the developers are working on that. But even that is the last thing that we do. We don't do that while we're developing the game. While I'm doing all my prototyping in the games, my hands are going through everything. It feels like I'm playing with fake things because nothing has any haptic feedback. So, but just to a point there, in my experience, I've worked with several developers and consulted with a lot of different studios, and almost every single one of them is always just trying to pay their employees a proper wage. So really, we're in an industry that's growing, and we're just now, 2022, getting to the place where we're actually starting to see a lot of gains in the right spots. So we're going to start seeing certain studios take advantages, take leads, and we're going to start seeing some of these haptics, as I said, in the next few years. Because of esports and other things, they're going to start standardizing that. Just like we now have virtual reality because of cell phones and all the standardization of chipsets and screens and things like that happen through time. Even though we have thousands of cell phones, a lot of those devices are similar. We need to get to that point with virtual reality where we can have different things, but a lot of those other base things stay the same. Mm-hmm. And once again, we're getting there right now. This is a beautiful time to be alive in XR because
it is happening.
5 years ago, we were really far from that, whereas right now, it's hard for me to say, is it next year? Is it 2 years or 3? So we're really close.
Thank you.
We have to wrap up. Oh, okay, good, perfect. Hey.
I produce music with haptics.
Yeah.
I use that in integration. How far away are we from like using that in like a DAW plugin or something like that? So I can like program like bass in certain areas or drums in certain limbs and stuff like that.
Now,
Yeah.
I think we're there now. I think basically
Yeah.
with each device that they have, as well as the Woozer device that I've seen out there and tried, all of these things allow us to actually take music and customize a design pattern, as you would say, maybe to time it with the music. There's many different ways that you can develop this, basically. But yeah, we're at the moment right now with what you're talking about. People are doing it, and it's really cool. So if you make music, get on that right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we want to play with it.
Yes.
Yeah, goes without saying. Yeah.
Send it over.
Goes without saying. Awesome. Let's round of applause for these awesome panelists. Thanks so much, guys. Well done. Well done.